arrival. Okay, we have item 1, we have no apologies. Item 2, request from the public to address the meeting. There are no public speakers. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held in public on the 11th of December. Cabinet, are we happy to agree those?
Can you note that they're amended, that we've received amendments?
Okay, and there have been several amendments, and if anybody wants to see those amendments, we can make them available. What's the date today? 15th. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest by any members that are not already on the register. Cabinet? No? Okay, announcements. Obviously we've had to relocate due to an issue with the other room, and I hope we can make this room work. I can see that we're being recorded again, so I haven't had any feedback on the woes or wherefores of how well that worked, but I had a quick look and it seemed to do a reasonable job. And the only other announcement is I've heard today that our colleague, Councillor Andre Gonzalez de Savage, is ill and stuck in Australia. So I've already sent him, on behalf of other members, our best wishes, and we hope to see him back in the country soon. Okay, we'll move straight on. Here's Teresa, we'll let us settle in.
It is the blue room. It is a famous blue room. It's a freezing blue room.
Yeah.
Listed.
Okay, we'll move straight on to the agenda. Item 6, the scrutiny review of social worker recruitment and retention, and Councillor Perry would like to briefly introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. I want Cabinet to have a look at the recommendations in this report, and also for us to agree to provide a written response to the report on what actions we're taking arising from it. I'm actually going to invite the author of the report and the chair of that committee to come up and talk us through, because there was a lot of hard work put into this by the members and the officers, and we did have a member of the public representing on that group, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the work that's been put in, and it's something that I've been very keen to happen for a long time, so I just want to thank them for making it happen. And if I could invite Councillor Eakins to come and present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say, before we kick off, to thank you, Chair, and the other members and public that participated in this. It's very timely, given where we are with children's services. So, the floor is yours, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reciprocate on a couple of things first. And the first one is for Councillor Perry and yourself for challenging the decision made by the commissioners who had an edict to stop all scrutiny, but then we allowed this one to continue because we knew the good work that it was going to deliver. So I thank you personally for that one. And special thanks to Jean Linico as a member of public that actually joined. She was very, very informative and helped us in this. And also Ben Luck and James Edmonds, they did all the hard work. We just did the easy part of it and they put the paper together. So special thanks to them. Chair, what I'd like to do is the whole idea of this scrutiny review is commissioned to scrutinise areas where the retention and recruitment of social workers within Children First Northamptonshire at Northampton Council could be improved. And that was the core business of what we did. I'm not going to go through the whole of the paper, but as you can see, that the focus that we had, we did things a little bit different than normal, is that we invited social workers on two basically work groups where we invited all social workers to attend a morning session and then social workers managers to attend an afternoon session, of where we invited them to give us a warts and all personal review of their, shall we say, experience within the social workers of Children's First. And I must admit, they were very, after a bit tentative, and then started to trust us a little bit, then it was very forthcoming. And that really, those points that they brought up were the core of this report. There's lots of things. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to go through everything because I'm sure that most people have read the papers on it. But what was very clear was areas of where the county can improve on the facilities and the assistance of social workers to deliver their work. And one of them is quite clear that there was a lot of time social workers were taking up doing, I'm not going to belittle the administration, but a lot of senior social workers were spending up to 30 to 40% of their time making phone calls and supervising visits, etc., which obviously takes them away from doing their core work. In certain areas where you can find that, there was obviously a little bit of disparity in wages and pay, which we discussed in here. You have things like space for meetings, parking, a robust administration team, which I know some things have been happened, defined zones for working, and one of the most important things were somewhere that clients can come and have an area of privacy and seclusion from the main building workings of Angel. With that, I'd just like to invite anybody else if any questions that they'd like to put to us, and then hopefully we can answer them forthwith.
Okay. Cabinet, do we have any questions we'd like to ask Councillor Eakins? Any members? Okay, Councillor Stanborough.
Thank you, Chair. It was a very enjoyable and worthwhile experience to be part of the group that put this report together. And we've heard several times since then and before now that some of the recommendations are going to be taken up, are already being taken up, are being implemented. So whilst noting the wording of recommendation 1 that talks about Cabinet agreeing to consider the recommended areas for action set out in the report, I would hope that you may be able to confirm those areas that where action is actually already being taken. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you, Chair. May I nominate Councillor Roy to speak on this?
Okay.
Again,
Carry on.
Firstly, to thank the working group for their work on this. It's obvious that everybody's been very passionate about this. And also I'd like to give my thanks to Jean Lineker about this. It's something that she's talked to me at length about. Just also to state that within the report, the highlight on an organisation that supports fairness in paying conditions highlights a particular area. However, I'm disappointed that it does not go as far as going back to national pay terms and conditions, which I think does have a big impact in terms of this particular field. And it is not just about the pay, it is about the terms and conditions as well. So engaging on social media with a number of people who've chosen to do so, when I've highlighted the County Council's particular current recruitment campaign, I've had comments about particularly the terms and conditions where staff are still having to take a pay cut on the first day they go sick. We know that this particular area of work has been under considerable pressure. We have a very loyal and dedicated workforce, and people do put in 110% to this very critical area of work for the most vulnerable of people. And as such, we should be cognizant of this. And I'd like to encourage Cabinet to consider this, particularly in the movement towards unitary authorities. We had part of this discussion in the scrutiny meeting this morning, where we know that our district and borough partners are employing people on national pay terms and conditions, and the sooner we start thinking about this, the better.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haycock. These are supposed to be questions, just a reminder.
Thank you, Camera. Yeah, we've got to ask a question. Also recognising the importance of the scrutiny, and I think it's what Councillor Sambra said, the recommendation agrees to consider. We're always talking about pace, aren't we, and timescales and milestones. I just think agrees to consider the recommended areas is a bit weak. Therefore, there needs to be a clear identification of that. So how are we going to make sure that we do consider? And the second point in the recommendation agrees to provide a written response. How will we monitor that progress against the good work that was carried out that can come back to scrutiny to see that it was delivered?
Okay, thank you. I've got a comment, first of all, to obviously thank the group again and thank Councillor Eakins, but I put the report, I asked the Children's Commissioner, Malcolm Houston, for any comments, and he basically said that he supports the recommendations in the report and also acknowledges that progress has already begun on many of the issues highlighted, and also put to us a couple of other areas that we obviously still need to keep working on. The challenge to us, in the point I think Councillor Hakewell was just alluding to, is how do we keep this up and make sure that change actually happens? Because I think some of the feedback from the staff was that we've heard some of this before, you know, and the challenge to us as an administration, as members, is that we've got to demonstrate through the staff and the directors that this is something we're taking very, very seriously. And I think I actually agree with the point around, you know, this is critical to the progress of the organisation, especially in this directorate, and of course to the wider points made around staff. But it's something we've got to take very, very seriously, and certainly myself and Cabinet colleagues will be doing that. Just one second. Sharon, would you like to add something?
Sorry, I was late.
Do you want to come up to a mic, if that's okay?
I'm quite happy just to quickly whiz through on page 8 the key themes and give an update in terms of what we have done and what we will be doing, if that would help address some of those questions. So the first one, page 8 then, in terms of the proposed themes and solutions, a base that supports social work teams. It's absolutely the case that we know, based on this report and from direct engagement with staff and frontline, that a number of our offices do not support social practice in the way we want them to. It's also absolutely the case that I've had Teresa's direct support in commissioning a piece of work to go and talk to all of our service managers and team managers to actually ask of them, what is it that you need? Within that, I've been very clear about, and excuse the expression, I've asked staff not to be greedy because we still need to be cognizant of the space requirements. But within that, we've understood that a 2 to 10 desk ratio for field workers is not appropriate. It isn't conducive to a good working environment. So we are roughly around 80% of the way through a piece of work which actually identifies team by team what people have said they need in their particular working environment. That report is coming to my senior leadership team tomorrow for a first run through, and it is our absolute intent by the 1st of April to have reconfigured where the teams are. That does mean that there'll be a staged approach because some are easier to do than others, but we will absolutely be going back to the workforce to talk about the team environment. And most of all, it's about social workers. It isn't just social work staff, actually, some of our other staff too, to be fair. But they have a base, they have a team, and they have a place where they feel connected, where they can be supported in their work, but also know for sure that they've got the necessary equipment to do the job. So on the social work base, that will be resolved, and it's beyond social work teams as well. In terms of an organisational structure and systems, it is true, and again we've heard from a number of constraining factors that prevent our practitioners to be the best that they can be, and that's absolutely what we want them to be. So the new target operating model, which is being launched, was launched with the unions yesterday and will be launched with staff on the 22nd and 24th of January. We'll be talking about a number of changes to the target operating model, which puts in resource in business administration, in family support work and in contact work, because we understand there are things that our social workers are currently doing that prevent them from doing the quality of social work we would wish to see. So absolutely around that, there will be a new system and a new structure that will absolutely allow practitioners to practice. My challenge to practitioners then is I really expect them to up the game and make sure their assessments are strong, that their practice is evidence-based, and that we deliver the best service to children and families. On top of that, we are also looking at a new IT system. There's a meeting today led by Paul, our Transformation Director, where we're looking at implementing a new system which will allow us to have a much more connected view of what's going on in a child's life. That will also allow social workers to spend more time with families. The third point, an organisation that supports fairness in pay and conditions. Whilst I absolutely agree with this, I think it's really important to note that when you talk to staff, it isn't all about money. It's a combination of factors. But we absolutely accept that there are others around us that can offer more, and we absolutely accept that it can sometimes be the final straw in terms of people leaving the organisation. So, and also attracting to the organisation. So again, in the work that we'll be presenting next week, we are going to be offering changes to our terms and conditions with a market supplement for social workers. That will mean that those social workers that have been trapped on a grade that see other agency staff or permanent staff coming in will have their pay recalibrated. That's not common knowledge yet, but it was communicated with the unions yesterday and will be communicated to staff. It will be a very positive sign of change, but actually it's a package of change around the working environment. In terms of recognising good practice, we do actually have a number of mechanisms to do that, and we absolutely, through our delivery of signs of safety as our key methodology, really need to focus on the strengths in our service as well as the areas that need development. The compliments and cake session, which is referenced in here, we've recently looked at that, and we're going to split that into the north and the south of the county, because we know a lot of our practitioners in the north don't get to travel over here because of their constraints. So again, we're looking at some of the factors that frustrate staff and make sure we put those in place. In terms of professional progression, absolutely agree with this, and I have heard from our staff that many feel that they can't find a career pathway through our service. So that's particularly the case with social workers or practice managers, where they see agency staff coming in and feel they haven't been given the opportunity to progress. So part of our launch next week of the target operating model, I'll be asking each and every practitioner to send to me their career aspirations, and within that we will look at what we need to do to support staff to progress to their next post. That also means that we'll have some very honest assessments around skills and competencies, to make sure that when we do progress people, they have had the necessary training, leadership, management oversight to allow them to practice safely. And finally, an organisation that seeks to maximise proactive recruitment. Last Monday we launched our new website, www.childrenfirstjobs.co.uk, and it's targeted to recruiting social workers and team managers into our organisation. As of close of play Friday, we had 10 applicants for posts, and I think it was 2,000 hits on the website. We will continue to promote and push that. Hopefully that evidences that everything in this report has been picked up and has been central, alongside listening to our staff from my perspective, in taking our organisation forward.
Okay, thank you, Sharon, and thank you for the work that you've done leading this directorate through this very difficult time. Colleagues, are there any questions to Sharon at all?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got a question. I'd just like to say thank you to my colleague, Councillor Perry, and Councillor Eakins, and everyone else who's been involved in this very worthwhile piece of work, because it will have a knock-on effect in adult social care with social workers. So I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eakins, is there anything you wanted to add?
Just finish up, Chair. Right. Just quickly in response to Councillor Hakewell's comments, just to put on record is that I have and will continue to pressure the portfolio holder to give me updates on progress, and I'm very pleased to say that she's given me what she can so far, and that is important, Chair, because we have the understanding that our recommendations will be considered, and we also understand that where possible they will be delivered, however, may not be in the exact format as we made our recommendations. So there may be a twist on how it works, but that's obviously for operational reasons, and we do understand that. And just to reassure Councillor Hakewell, is that we did put a proviso at the very end, is that 3 months after delivering this paper to Cabinet, is that we will request a further meeting, just basically to bring forth the how far it's gone and what has been put into place as an update, not only for members but also for members of the public and the social workers themselves. And with that, Chair, is just once again I'd like to thank the members of the committee or of the working group, and especially the officers as well, for putting all this together for us.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I just wanted to say, in terms of an update, on the 30th of January, we've got a one-off children's scrutiny where our Children's Commissioner will be attending, myself and the officers, to give an update on the Ofsted and the improvement journey. And that will encapsulate some more detailed information about the changes that have been made related to Ofsted, but also the input from your hard work. So hopefully people who are interested, as many of you could attend that as possible, would be really appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So we will obviously, in the meantime as well, make sure we do provide a written response as per recommendation 2. So Cabinet, we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agree.
Thank you. So item 7 is the monthly revenue monitoring report. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've all read the report. I'll probably go through this very much as I go through with the parish councils, because they are taking a very keen interest in my experience. Usually talk about the background and then move on to where we came from, which shows this is on page 43, those haven't got it, and it shows where we finished up at the end of last year, which was having taken 4.7 of reserves, which is always not a good thing to do, but we then end up with 35.3 negative. If you see, there's a graph down below, a histogram, showing where the deficit now stands as the year's gone on. We've included the 35 at the start, and I'll come to that in a moment. Moving over to page 45, which is the one that I think most people like to follow, there are 3 key points on here. The first is if you look down at the bottom, the 35304, anybody who's been following this will know that we got the go-ahead from the government to use capital reserves to effectively pay off that 35.3 deficit, and that's now shown in the monthly accounts for information. The most important thing about that, in my view, Chair, was not so much the money, as I think I've said before. That in itself is significant, obviously, but it's a show of confidence, I think, that from the government. The other 2 points, and the first one to look at is if you look at the less funding line, and you'll see that's gone from a round figure of £1 million, which was an estimate, to 2.389, an increase or sort of an input of 1.389 million. Well, I've got to confess that's a windfall. What happened there was that I'll try and if I get the right terminology, that's the business rates levy accounts redistributed. What it is the government at all their estimate of the business rates, and in fact they've got an excess, so and that's our share of it. So that's very useful. The other significant move is in adult social services, where we've capitalised the big number. There's £2 million worth of equipment. So all in all, that gives us a year-end outlook as we stand today, or as we stand at the end of period 8, I'm sorry, of just over 11 million. So that's where we go. So that's very encouraging. Moving on through the report, I think that the other thing I would point out is on page 53, you'll see where the 2.389 comes, business rates. And moving on, I think the one thing I would say here is that if we're moving on to page 57, the councillors Chris and Nick will inevitably ask me the question, so I'll answer it before he does. There's an 8.4 in the amber, and as you all know, that's to do with the rate situation for the borough and the districts. Now, we thought that was time related. It apparently is not. So we've left it where it is temporarily. We'll see where that goes. But ever conscious of the risk associated with these things, the team has put together another cost reduction programme to try and circumvent that should it not happen. And I'm bound to say on this situation now that the team that I'm working with, I'm talking about the officers primarily, are as good as we're going to get. They're absolutely excellent, as good as I've ever worked with. So I'm very, very pleased with that's gone. You couldn't ask for more. And that, Chair, is my lot on that.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Scrimshaw to make a contribution to the meeting, and in so doing, can I just add that our approach to Cabinet is slightly different from yours, Leader, in that we do feel that as opposition members we do have a contribution to make, and as you know, our members have been working extremely hard since the beginning of this year in the budget scrutiny meetings, the improvement board, and all those linked meetings, and I think we are entitled to put forward a comment as much as ask a question, and I think there was a question in Councillor Roy's point about national paying conditions for social workers, and I'm sure Sharon has taken that away.
Okay, thank you. At the end of the day, this is our Cabinet meeting, so we run it how we want. But I also acknowledge the contribution of all members. I did make a note, actually. I meant to say this at the start, of all members across parties for their input into scrutiny, because I've been to a few meetings and they've been well attended, I think, and you've aired some very valuable points. Okay, thank you. Councillor Scrimshaw.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm addressing you, if I may, as Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Members will all be aware that the committee has put forward a series of written questions to Cabinet, which we hope to get a response to, and I'd like to thank Cabinet for the response that we got to the questions we put in last month. Those answers probably generated a few more questions, but I'm very conscious that we don't want to get into a tit-for-tat, just bouncing emails backwards and forwards. So I think the answers will just inform our future deliberations and possibly, private conversations with Cabinet members as we move forward. Regarding Councillor Longley's statement a second ago about other cost reduction programmes that are being put forward to address the current £11 million, that was covered, I think, in part of one of our questions, and I look forward, hopefully, to hearing some more about those. The verbal question, however, that you referred to, I might ask, because I gave you pre-warning, is related to the council tax proposals in the stabilisation plan. We understood that agreement had to be reached today, the 15th. Apparently not. Okay, that's fine. And hopefully that means that presumably means that an agreement has not yet been reached, but you're still confident one could be. Well, that's my question then. My further question to that would be, are those savings determined on getting an agreement with all 7 districts and boroughs? For example, if 6 agreed and 1 did not, does that mean you would be able to make 6/7 of the savings, or whatever it would work out to be? Or do you need to say all 7 to agree before we make any of the savings? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scrimshaw. Councillor Stamborough.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple of questions which I'd like to add. I'm not sure I'm asking them in any capacity other than leader of the Liberal Democrat group on this occasion. So the first one is on page 51 of the big book, at 5.21 corporate costs, we've got cost of commissioners, additional corporate finance expertise, and then over the page external reviews and single person discount review, which are being shown as current pressures. Has any assessment been made of those particular lines of expenditure as to whether or not they are transformational, and therefore qualifying for flexible use of capital receipts? And if so, what was the conclusion? And then the next question is around library. This one, predictably enough, when I can find it. Yes, so on page 52, so over the page. I wonder if I can make a little point about the fairness, or otherwise, of the savings, the mitigations that the library service has been asked to find versus the pressures under the library service. So, fully get that there was a proposal which wasn't able to be delivered. There's a pressure, therefore, £542,000. Reasonable expect to ask the library service to find that. Slightly unfair, I would submit, to ask the library service to mitigate the pressure around the judicial review costs. Some might argue that might be a cost that ought to be borne by what I'm going to call the corporate centre, and you can decide for yourselves where that might lie. But then to see that the mitigations, nevertheless, even if you add those two together, only come to £742,000. Library Service has found £884,000 worth of mitigations. So, £142,000 more than the pressures within the Library Service, and significantly more if you take out the judicial review cost. Effectively, the Library Service is mitigating other pressures within the Public Health, Wellbeing and Prevention Directorate. Is that fair?
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to these at the end, Councillor Longley, if that's okay. Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Leader. It's one of those things that often gets mentioned in Cabinet. A judicial review, exactly 200,000. Nothing is ever exactly 200,000. I don't know whether that's an estimate or if it is a final figure for all the invoices, bills or whatever that we had to come in. It may be that it's £10 up or £10 down, but it always worries me when something's accurate from that point of view, or a specific, not accurate, but a specific number. We all know that we lost all our reserves last year, but what is the, if you like, the SIP for... Sorry?
Carry on. You said we lost them. We actually used them. We didn't lose them.
Well, if you look at the account with reserves on it, there was nothing in it.
Well,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, it was lost. What is the basic... I enjoy all the banter, but what I'm trying to ask is, what is the level of reserves that is thought to be suitable for this particular authority? That was the question there. And coming back, the apprentice levy efficiency on 51, there'll be a question, but I hope I'm right in thinking that that levy goes back to central government if we don't employ enough apprentices to be able to take that up. So it goes out. My question is, why aren't we employing and going into the young people's area and employing enough apprentices to come in to the different functions of the council to actually spend that money which we are levying and will go away to central government? So judicial review, is it just dead on 200,000? The actual level of reserves, the central government money, does that 666 as a pressure go back to central government? And the last point there is, and it brings up Councillor Scrimshaw's point, when do we expect to get the boroughs and districts around the table happily saying, here's your money? Because clearly, the longer it goes into the financial year, the less likely it is to come and be a figure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's a couple of points I just wanted to make. On page 57, it talks about risks and talks around detox, and says in August 2017 we had 102 and in October 2018 we had 51, which represents significant progress. I was just going to ask Councillor Naden-Hawley to comment on some of the progress and where we are with the numbers, because I know a massive amount of work has been done in this area.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you look at page 57, it's quite self-explanatory what's been happening, but I'd just like to say that it's been reported to me yesterday that we are the lowest figures since 2016 in delayed transfers of care. So that in itself is a momentous thing to actually say, considering that last year it was in double figures. So I think we need to, get some perspective on what we've achieved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. On page 43, paragraph 4.2, it refers to the 2017-18 accounts being concluded in January 2019. This figure has slipped a couple of times and it's now January 2019. I wonder if the Section 151 officer or the internal audit function can tell us what the best estimate is at the moment.
Okay. Can we ask the 151 officer just to give us a brief comment on that? I understand that we're finishing off with one set of auditors and we're starting a new one, and obviously there are lots of ends, given what we've been through, to be tied up. But I don't know if you want us to make a brief comment, Ian, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, do it there now.
Yes, very brief. It was the comment about the figure of £35.3 million.
The question is, when are we actually going to see the figures published?
Right.
The account signed off.
We're in discussion with the auditors. They're still finalising their report. It will clearly be a substantial report. We think it will be early March before we call a meeting of the audit committee. That's our current thinking and our current assumption. And that gives us time to respond to the auditor's report once we receive it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cabinet, before we ask Councillor Longley to sum up, are there any other comments or queries? Councillor Longley, if you'd like to have a go at those questions raised.
Well, gladly. Referring to Councillor Mick over there, you know very well we welcome all the input we can get, and we've kicked off in that spirit, as you well know, and every Thursday before a cabinet meeting we attempt to give you the best briefing that we can, and but any input on that, let's have it, you know, because we've got no monopoly on all the answers by any means, so we're very pleased about that, and thanks for the written questions. We'll do our best to give you a straight answer as we can, and as we've done so far, try and keep that up. Now, you then moved on to the magic 8.401, which I think I probably answered for you. Will 6 out of 7 pay? I don't know. My colleague behind will tell you, no doubt, but the strategy is we'd love to get the 8.4 job done. You know, we're home and dry, but we've made no assumptions that we're going to get that in the final forecast, nor will we till we have it in the bag. As a consequence, our CEO and their team immediately have gone into more cost reduction programs, so to mitigate said potential. If it doesn't happen, we're up a gum tree if we hadn't done that. So that's the strategy, and we intend to drive down that deficit to the best of our ability. But equally, we're not going to make any silly expressions of it's all going to be all right, because it might not be. You know, there are wobblies to come out the woods yet, possibly, maybe not. There's some good things as well, but you've got to be prudent on these things, and you can look at that 11 million now and say that with some confidence. It's 4 months to go yet. It's just period 8, so we'll see. I'll come back to the 59 million, the flexible capital receipts, because that's actually, I was going to bring up in the capital side of things, if you'll bear with me, in that report. Life isn't fair, Chris. Bring tears to my eyes, you do. And that's a reality. Everybody plays their part to the best of their ability. And that's the answer I can give on that, and I'm sure that our officers would give you more detail, but that's the view I'd take on that. Moving on to yours, Jim, the 200,000, anything around them is always an estimate. You know, there's the only way you can view it. It would be the view at that tick of the clock. It won't be 200. I entirely agree with you. But that was the view at that point in time. Some of the reserves, there are some reserves left at the end of the year, but they were ring-fenced items, so you know that they couldn't be used for anything other than that which they're ring-fenced for. What is the level? Well, therein lies a debate, and that debate, if we're in the fortunate position to be building up our levels, will no doubt run through next year. We'd like to think they will. But, I mean, everybody has a view. I have a view. I'm not going to give you that view because the CEO will have quite another one, no doubt, and so it goes on. And that will be discussed, and a suitable number. But you then got to achieve it, of course. A bit more difficult. Okay, apprentice levy. I don't know what the answers to that is. I'm hoping somebody can support me on that, but if they can't, I'll come back to you on it, Jim. Yeah, and district and boroughs, I think I've probably answered that, have I? Yeah, well, I'm not putting in a when. I'm saying it's an amber. We'd dearly love to get it in this year, will we? You know, we'll see. Four periods to go, so therefore we put a contingency in, and that's just management, isn't it? You know, and if we got it, well, happy days. But I'm not giving you a number because I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask the Chief Exec to make a comment on the apprenticeship levy?
I absolutely agree. We shouldn't be giving any of it back, and it's currently under review to see how much we can spend ourselves without having to return that to government. I'd like to keep all of it if we could.
So before we finish off, I just wanted to add that we have made significant progress, and you can see that, plot that according to the graph that we've got before us on page 43. Obviously, there's still some way to go, and there's still some ambers, as we've talked about, especially around things like the council tax contributions from the districts and boroughs. But I know, certainly as leader and as cabinet, we can take heart from the focus and determination the Chief Exec and the senior team have taken in dealing with the mitigations that Councillor Longley has spoken of. And I look forward in the next period to hopefully see that number decrease, hopefully significantly. But until, as Councillor Longley has alluded to, these savings are banked effectively and proven that they are real, they will not show up on any of the reports that come before us. So quietly and cautiously optimistic is a sort of language I've used previously, and we're still in that vein. So on that note, Cabinet, are we happy to agree the report? Okay, thank you. So item 8, the monthly capital report. Councillor Longley again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take you through to a sort of a page to really cover the last question I had from, I think Jim it was, and that's if you look at page 66 to start with. I'm going to give you some bad news situations here now, so that you know where we stand. Because I don't want to have a situation whereby I have to come back later in the year. If you look at item 7, you'll see that the capital receipts number comes to 59,073. Now, you may recall that we paid off 35 million for last year's deficit, yeah, and being the clever chap here, Chris, you'll see that there's a little bit left. You take 20 million out, which has gone back into reserves, okay? It doesn't leave very much left. We're not dealing with 75 million. That's the point I'm making here. We're dealing with 59,073, and that's where the numbers come from. Leaves about 4 or 5 million left, and that's really been consumed already by the various programmes, albeit smaller, where we'll be able to use this capital receipts for transformation. So there's nowhere to go on that this financial year. That's the point I'm making. Okay? Anyway, I haven't cheered you all up. We're moving on to the other two bits of bad news, are that, well, if we look down to item 4, because the rest are pretty straightforward, I think you find, the community equipment, 2 million there, is the counter to the 2 million capital I alluded to on agenda item 7. So that's 1 in, 1 out sort of thing, same numbers. So we look at Chester Farm, and if you look at the write-up on Chester Farm, you'll see we've got a problem here. And I want this to be understood by everybody. And where we go on this is the issue. We spent a lot of money. There's really no going back as far as I can see. But we do have a potential for a capital hit there, and unfunded as far as I can see. moving on to the Daventry Development Link Road, that's a different matter. That's, and these are all worst-case scenarios we're putting in, by the way. That should be funded, okay, but from other sources. So, I don't really want to go any further than that, Chair. Frankly, I think that says all. That's the key issues on there. I'm sure everybody else have some other questions, but those are key issues.
Okay. Are there any comments from opposition members? Councillor Stanborough.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. So just on Chester Farm, thanks, Malcolm, for that explanation. So just to be sure that I understand you correctly, there's a possibility of a 2.2 million, what's described as a gross funding commitment here, of which we are currently, you're going to allocate £300,000, but it's possible we may have to find a further £1.9 million, and reading between the lines, it sounds like if we do, we're going to have to borrow that money. Is that correct?
Okay. Councillor Haycock? Yeah, sorry.
Very quick, and obviously it's a capital report. Buckton Fields down at Kingsthorpe, that was due, but we slipped up with planning permission. When and where would we see the potential arrival of what was about 12 million at that time? So I don't know where we would ever see it in the pipeline, but when has it been sold? Because I drive past the sign which says sold, whether that's the part of it or not. And when would we see that capital receipt come into our funds?
Okay. Any comments from the Labour group? No? Okay. Okay, I just wanted to add, I know Malcolm always underplays some positivity, but the fact is that there's a significant amount of money being spent here, which is good for Northamptonshire, and I think we do need to recognise that. And the issue, I know I had it highlighted as well, around the 59 total available capital receipts. There is a good news story in there, in so much as that government recognise the hard work, and there's confidence in there going back around that decision to allow us up to £70 million dispensation. So, whilst we obviously still need to know some of the issues that we're talking about, there are some good points in there. I just wanted to make sure we recognise that. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just, before Teresa's going to bail me out on this one in a minute, but I just wanted to make the point on Buckton Fields, Jim. I don't know. It was supposed to go in last year. It didn't happen. There are issues on it at the moment. I won't agree it going in until it's there. No, doesn't happen until it happens.
Chief Exec has some comments on
that. If I may. Yes, we have done a deal, and that was signed last week. We're in discussion at the moment as to which year the capital receipts will be receipted into.
Whether it's this year or next?
Yes. Yes.
The figure? Is that
it's complicated. It's a portion of the figure, because it was deal was done before my time, but it was done on the basis of 3 stages of payments. So the first payment would be about £2.5 million.
So the point is,
to ask what the other two are. That's complicated.
Yeah, they're similar amounts.
So the point is, when it's appropriate, those figures and the sale of that will be reported in this report. And until then, until it's decided, they're not going to appear, because we don't want to preempt and double count. Yeah.
Can I just have a final thing? The key here is we're constant on the revenue account. That's capital input. Lovely stuff, a lot of cash in it, but the revenue account is where our primary focus is, certainly in mine. The officers have got 1 or 2 more things as well, but that would be sort of where I'd be focused.
Thank you.
Okay, Cabinet, are we happy to agree with the report? Agreed. Okay. Item 9, the risk management report. Councillor Longley.
Well, this is the, pretty much obvious risk management. Now, this is very much a work in progress document, as all those associated with risk management will know and understand. And I'm not going to say very much on it, other than to say that do read it, do study it, and let's have your ideas. what do you think? You know, have an input to it, because that's what it's all about. If you see a risk, we had a good fortune of going around the Mercedes plant just recently, and they have every employee putting their input into these things. So, don't sort of just critique it by all means, but feel as if you're part of it. Thank you, Chair. That's all I've got to say on this one.
Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you, Chair. My question for Councillor Longley is about where this risk management plan sits with the transformation plan, the stabilisation plan. Is there a constant reference now to a risk management plan along with the Section 151 officer and the Director for Transformation? Are you all talking about managing risk and this plan and how it fits with those two other plans? And perhaps the Chief Executive might be able to help you out there. And my other question is about when the audit report, which as has been acknowledged is a substantial document, I'm disappointed to hear that that's been put back a little bit and been delayed. I'm sure you are as well. So how will that help you with your managing the budget as well, considering that we will only get to see this report once the Council's held its important budget meeting? So it won't be, we're dismayed that the audit report won't be available until at least 2 weeks after the meeting of the full council to decide next year's budget.
Okay. Did any of you, Councillor Hakewell?
I know I was closed down in scrutiny, but as we sit here today, by 7 o'clock tonight, we will have some direction from central government. What are we planning, what are we planning in terms of the risks associated with Brexit in any direction? Because clearly every business in the land, every individual, even a household, is sitting there wondering what impact that is. So this is a risk register. For the first time in generation, we've got a major risk outside. And of course, James Brokenshire, the Minister, did write to the Chancellor asking for funds for even things like civil unrest, which we did scrutinise in public scrutiny, public health. So what are we doing to assess the risks of, albeit the emerging, Brexit situation? Thank you.
Councillor Irvine-Smith.
Yes, in the new RIT register we have refreshed, and it was very important. And I think you have our commitment that we will keep our risk register an ongoing document, because what is important is that we review it and we improve it. The risk register that we had previously was not fit for purpose, so it's a first, or it could have been better. So that is, and with all what the officer have to do at the moment, it was an extra piece of work that added to their pressure. So I would thank the officer for that, but it's still work in progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's my view as well, that this goes before the Audit Committee, and if we need to shape it and keep it live, it's a live document, isn't it? A risk register should be live, and we should be able to add and take off it as and when we see fit, including issues like Brexit, one would think. Chief Exec has got a point.
If I could, just in response to your question around how regularly and how integrated it is. It's now a standing item on the management team's agenda, so we look at it on a regular basis. We work with the internal auditors as well, who come to our management team to help us to review it, to challenge each other as well, and to understand what's a trigger, what's a risk. Behind that corporate plan sits individual plans for each directorate with detailed risk registers that sit there. That's really only the plans and the risks that have been considered to be corporate and across the whole of the organisation, and we will keep that very relevant and very up to date and well used in the current risky climate. And then just the second point I wanted to make was that we are preparing a bespoke report on Brexit for members, and we'll issue that shortly.
Thank you. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to cover the where does it sit question, which is a very important thing, and I think Fraser's hopefully covered that well for you. But you've got to be careful on these risk registers. You're not careful, you can have a situation where everything is such a risk you don't do anything. So it's very much a balance, and it's not easy. I mean, my background's in the aircraft industry, and you know, if you saw the risk registers in making an aeroplane, you probably wouldn't fly. You know, but so you've got to get the balance right here. And it's the first job. I mean, until 4 months ago, I didn't even realise we had a risk register. So that's where we're coming from. So, but it's going in the right direction, I think, anyway. But have your input. Have your input.
Okay. Thank you.
Audit. How do you manage that? Well, you take a view of what the likely outcome is, and the budget we've currently got in has taken that view, right or wrong, and if it changes from that, we'll have to adapt accordingly, is the answer to that question. And I'm very pleased to say that Teresa's answered the Brexit risk issue. So, Chair, that's my lot.
Yeah, we don't need to open that.
No.
I guess the only question is, what is shortly in terms of that report?
Probably a week or two. Yeah, about a week or so.
Okay, Cabinet, we happy to agree with the report?
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10, the implementation of new code of practice for well-managed highway infrastructure. Councillor Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Every now and again we have to adopt a new code of practice in connection with the maintenance, etc. of our highways, which we all agree is very important to us as it's one of our biggest assets. So we have to make sure it's maintained as well as we can maintain it. In order for us to comply with government funding for highways maintenance and other things, we are pretty much required to adopt new codes of practice from time to time, and this is one of those new codes of practice. The key difference between the old codes and this new code is that the new code is introducing more of a risk-based approach to all maintenance policies. It doesn't include maximum, minimum or default standards. It is intended to allow the local authority to reflect on local needs, priorities and affordability in determination of their own standards. In practice, what this means is that the repair, if any, will be based on a specific assessment of the defect risk. Investigation depths for carriageway and footway potholes and the corresponding timescales for repairing any safety defects based upon the designation of the road and footway are set out in Appendix 5. We've basically reviewed all the network hierarchy to include factors such as traffic volumes, HGV usage, journey times and delays, traffic generators, etc., etc., so that so we have a resilient network for future housing, etc., and things like that, and flood risk, things like that. So for the carriageway, there are now 7 categories of hierarchy, which are all outlined in Appendix 1. A similar review will be undertaken on the footway repair hierarchy as well. Basically, this code will lead to further codes that we have to implement, and these will include the asset management policy and strategy, the asset management communication strategy, highway safety inspection manual, and network management plan. I think really all you need to know is that it will mean that we can probably react better to certain situations and certain repairs that we perhaps haven't been able to do in the past because of the codes of practice that we've been following. But this is really good news, I think, and it will allow us to react better to reported defects and things like that. Also, we did want to mention the £6.7 million that we got from the government, extra funding, which shows how good we are at getting in funding for these things. Yes, we need more, but it's a really good start and will help us to catch up with a lot of the repairs and damages that we have on our roads that resulted from last winter's rather harsh weather conditions. We have our fingers and toes crossed that we don't get a similar incident this winter. We will be resilient and we will be able to cope with that, but the backlog of repairs, which we are now pretty much clearing from last year, we don't really want any further weather conditions to hamper that going forward. So I recommend this report to the Cabinet and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Brookfield.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Councillor Strachan, but can I sneak in a quick question to Councillor Morris, which is about the downgrading of strategic routes in the north of the county? There seems to be some disparity between the north and the west.
Okay, we'll pick that up. Councillor Strachan, would you like to come up to the...
I don't know anything about that.
He's going the long way.
taking the longest route.
No,
Chairman, thank you. I was one of the one of the members of the scrutiny working group that recommended this paper to Cabinet, and therefore is in full agreement with this new code of practice for well-managed highway infrastructure. Chairman, I think the Cabinet member will join me in thanking the members of that committee, the officers, and also a member of the public who was very instrumental in getting this report together. In 3.10 on page 5 of the report, it refers to integration level and investigation response. I've got a question here on this. How would this work in practice? In other words, who triggers the intervention level? One of our highway officers, or is it an officer of our subcontractor? And Chairman, in 3.11, same page, it makes reference to Appendix 5, which is on page 14, subheading carriageway, item 2. And it reads, our response times for carriageway are 24 hours for a priority 1 response. In bracket, new urgent response time, we still have the 2-hour option for emergency. Based on that, with the current situation of restrictions on spending, and in particular, where, as I understand, all spending have to be approved by a board, how would this work? Will there be a set sum set aside for this kind of emergency stroke category 1 repair? Also, who holds the fund for this? The place directive, or will it be the subcontractor? Or will the subcontractor be given, the freedom to go ahead and carry out the necessary repair, then invoice the council, provided the cost is within a certain limit? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Councillor Stambra.
Nominate Councillor Meredith.
Just before you sit down, Councillor Meredith, I know you like to use your opposition leverage and have a go at us sometimes, but I know you've been ill and it's good to see you back. So please carry on.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I just quickly would like to say that I have had this serious illness, but luckily I'm now fully recovered, except just feeling a little bit weak after my experience. I'd just like to thank you for your best wishes, and also for Victoria for sorting out a small problem that I had. Much appreciated. On saying that, on this particular report, I'm very concerned, but I do welcome the government's input to put extra money in to repair some of the roads, which I've seen a decline from this year so far, although we haven't had much weather. Some of the roads are really looking quite worse for wear, and I think with this report, really it's false economy, I think. Because it's like an issue when if you leave something in your house and you keep putting it off not to repair it, and when you go to repair it, it costs you more money. So I think that is a scenario which we're going to be faced with here. I noticed on the risk assessments, I've seen that there's unable to defend future claims if authority is not following national guidelines. that in itself, I think, is a major risk to us, because if potholes get worse, or especially some of the footpaths in the divisions that I represent are in a terrible condition. They really are, and more claims will actually come to the county council, and it will cost the county council more money. So I think this cabinet needs to look at these things very seriously, and to find out what is actually going on. I also feel that the Northampton Borough Council have sorted out their environmental waste procurement, and what is happening now, a lot of the residents are quite happy the way that situation is resolved, but what they're saying to me is, what are they actually getting out of the county council? And I say to them this, and I don't try to put the county council down. I just say to them, well, you know,
finish up.
Oh, sorry. They are short of money. They are short of money, and it's very difficult. I did want to say a little bit more, but I appreciate time is there. But please take my sentiments on board, because I do think that it could be false economy. I really do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. The Appendix 1 Proposed Maintenance Hierarchy Network has a colour scheme that seems to me to be slightly confusing. It appears to me that the Highways England roads on it are labelled with the same symbology as local access roads, which I'm sure they're not. Can I suggest that when the next time this map is produced, there is a separate colour scheme or indicator for the Highways England roads, because this did leave me somewhat confused. It took me quite a while to work out what I was actually seeing. E.g., the A605, which I know is a county council road, is shown as a strategic route, which it is, but the continuation of it, where it becomes the A45, is suddenly apparently labelled as a local access road, when I know for a fact it's a Highways England road. So if we could have that, it would provide a bit of clarity in future.
Okay, thank you. Just before Councillor Morris comes back, the extra money from government has been mentioned. I just wanted to say that I signed a joint letter from all the county council network leaders to thank the Secretary of State for acknowledging the need for more money for the roads, and I also wrote to all of our MPs to thank them for any lobbying they've done on our behalf, and ask them to pass on our thanks to the Secretary of State if they get the opportunity. And to be fair to at least two of them, I know they did that, because we've had a letter back from the Secretary of State thanking them for the acknowledgement, which, if you look at where the County Council was a year ago, we were persistently talking to government saying we've not got enough money, we need more money. So I think that narrative has helped us with that relationship, certainly with central government and with our MPs, to acknowledge these small wins, and I know, having spoken to them, that they do appreciate that, and I'll continue that. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair, and I would endorse what you've just said there. Our MPs have worked very hard for us, particularly a number of them. I won't name them all. Tom Pursglove and Michael Ellis as well have worked very...
Sorry, Councillor Morris, I didn't invite Councillor Hakewill to
ask
his
I'm so
question.
sorry. I wouldn't want to carry on, Councillor Hakewill.
Just three points, really. As we look at a highways maintenance hierarchy, I sit on a group which is seeking to get a link road in Rothwell. We did a piece of research which said how many HGVs have been prosecuted in Northamptonshire for breaching a 7.5-tonne limit, which this authority imposes. The answer seemed to be none. There is no one to enforce it. The point I'm making is, can the portfolio holder make some reference to the fact that if you are looking at maintaining a road which theoretically has a 7.5-tonne limit on it, but is being constantly abused and damaged, clearly your maintenance hierarchy doesn't work in that way. The second point I would make is, we've had the cuts that are there in things like gritting. Rural dwellers, often farms and other places like that that are extremely rural, are always at the butt end of everything, because you inevitably look towards urban urban and town areas where there are greater volumes of traffic. It just seems unfair, particularly as a lot of us are elected by a lot of rural dwellers, that those services and in these hierarchies, those roads and lanes are important to those people, are important to farming and other industry. To leave them out of our main focus, it does seem unfair. I appreciate if we had enough money, we'd do them all. And the last point, your point, Leader, about going to the government and seeking funding, when you look at a highway maintenance hierarchy, and everyone in this room will know, we are very, very heavily dominated by warehousing. The statistic that I was told once was one HGV has the same damaging impact on adjacent property as 44 cars passing by. So when we do talk, when we do talk to government, it ought to be respected that we are warehousing rich, if that's the right way. It's certainly rich when it comes to rates, but that we are disproportionately affected by the volume of HGVs because of the nature of our warehousing base. So those are three. HGV, how can we actually get people prosecuted, make sure we maintain? Rural dwellers, just not fair to constantly take away services, gritting, highways or whatever. And can we lobby government to say, when we are getting a share of any money, we actually are disproportionately affected by HGV? Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I'll continue where I was and just name check my... It's all right, no, because I didn't realise you were there, but I will talk. We'll come to you in a minute. You know, on top of the 6.7 million, we have to remember that we also got funding for the pothole funding as well, in year as well, which was around 1.1 million. So we do very well at getting extra funding for our roads, and Tom Purseglove and Michael Ellis particularly probably couldn't be name-checked as MPs who have worked particularly hard to get that extra funding for us, but they all work very hard to get that extra funding for us, as Matt said, and they will continue to do that. Yes, we could do with more money for our highways, but I think given where we're at, getting that extra money in is a really good win for the highway service. And it will be spent in highways as well, just to reassure everyone, and helping out with things like Andal Bridge and things like that. I will go in reverse order, if I may. So I'll start with Councillor Hickwell, because I rudely didn't realise he was asking me some questions. So in terms of HGVs, I'll start with that. We know there's a big problem with HGVs in this county, and in fact lots of local villages and towns and parishes have been lobbying for a long time about HGV movements and weight restrictions. One of the problems we have is we don't technically enforce those. The police enforce the weight restrictions. We are working with our Police and Crime Commissioner, Stephen Mould, to try and come up with some sort of policy across the county. It's not going to be easy because he's under as much pressure as everyone else in his budgets, but they do appreciate the problem with HGVs and going off route, as it were, because sat-navs are not really designed to follow designed routes anymore, so our HGV driving friends will tell us. So we will come up with something, I think, at some point that helps to tackle that, but it's not going to be an easy win, and it's not something that we can technically do. But I completely get your point and understand it completely and sympathise with it. Gritting, I think we've actually been quite reasonable with the way we've reprofiled, if you like, the gritting. We've tried to keep as many areas covered as possible. We've tried, in fact, percentage-wise, we were going to go further into reducing the gritting service than we have actually done, and I think we've actually maintained a very good level across most of the county. It's not possible to grit every road. In fact, we've never done that. We've only ever done about, I think, 36% or something like that, or that's where we're at now. I can't remember the exact figures, but we've never gritted every road in the county anyway. And with our adverse and precautionary routes, as how they've now been reprofiled, we're very confident that we're covering a lot of the county. But I do take that point on board. Thank you. I think that was your... I didn't think you had any more questions. Yes, and I think I answered that because we continually lobby government for funding. Who was next? Let's have a look. Well, Councillor Brookfield. I'm jumping all over the place here, but it sort of leans into what Councillor Mercer was saying as well. We've actually looked... I will look at Councillor Mercer. I will have a look at that for you and come back to you on that. But we haven't actually downgraded anything. What we've done is we've added more categories. this is the text speak for what it is. So they've not been downgraded, but there are now more categories of roads. I will come back to you with a more complex answer to that, but I don't think they've been downgraded. They've just been slightly reprioritised in the list, and there's more roads on that list. Councillor Strachan, obviously I thank you and the committee that fed into all the reports that we've got here, but we don't pay for, our work is on the roads is paid for out of our highways contract, which is an ongoing annual contract that covers all our highways work. So it's not, somebody doesn't report a pothole and then we have to pay them for it as such. It's covered in our global contract with, as it is Care at the moment, but in future, obviously that may change, but at the moment that's how we do it, and so all repairs are covered under the highways contract. So hopefully that will help answer that question. I think that was everyone, unless I've missed anyone out. Other than that, Chair, I recommend the report to the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cabinet, do we accept the report?
Accept.
Thank you. So item 11, the Construction Skills Training Centre at Wellingborough Prison. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I really do think this is a really good news story. I know I bang on about this quite a lot, so forgive me for saying it again, but we're often criticised for not collaborating, not working with our partners, not coming up with schemes that work for everybody. This, I mean, the list of people we've collaborated with on this is immense. We are the lead deliverer for this scheme, but I can name check most of the districts and boroughs, SEMLEP, various other parties that have been involved with this. You know, it's quite an undertaking, and also it's no cost to ourselves. So I think that's really good news. It's a £1 million grant to provide construction skills training for the development of Construction Skills Centre at the Wellingborough Prison site. It should support about 800 learners. Obviously, it will deliver jobs as well, the actual prison itself. I think this is a really, really big win for us, and it's been provided from the Department of Education out of a construction skills fund of 23 million. So we'll be the lead partner, but obviously we're not alone in that. There's a group of partners we'll be working well with to keep making sure that the outcomes are delivered. So the paper is fairly straightforward. It recommends various things, and I commend the report to the Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Hakel.
I always like to use imagination. We talked earlier. We talked earlier of 666,000 apprentice levy going back to the government. Is there any way with which, given the great relationship we have with government, to say some of that money could be reinvested into this construction skills centre so that it actually benefits the people of Northamptonshire rather than going off to the other way? I'm sure someone's thought about it, but it just seems like joined up government to me that we could get some apprentices in.
Okay.
Two different parts.
Councillor Mercer.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. This is an excellent use of funds, and I'm very pleased to see it. When Wellingborough Prison Reborn opens, it will provide between 400 and 500 full-time equivalents, which is a big plus for the county. Just one minor thing. Since we're going to be the accountable body for this work, can we be assured that if there are overruns, we won't be stiffed for the bill like we were with the International Academy?
Thank you. Councillor Maiden-Hawley.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that from Councillor Mercer. I do think that we need to have things in place that if it does overrun, that we need to be recompensed for that. On another point, this is just a comment, having taught in a number of British prisons, Wellingborough was my first prison. I was really sorry to leave that prison. There was a lot of really good work done in Northamptonshire, and it was a shame when Wellingborough Prison closed. And to see that land going to the way it went was, I just looked at it and I thought, what a waste. So I'm really happy that something productive is going to happen with that land.
Thank you. Just to echo those points, it is a good piece of collaborative work. Sorry. And just to answer Councillor Hakel's point, these are two separate pots of money, so we can't use one for another.
So it's capital and revenue.
Councillor Stanborough.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd also be interested in the assurance that Councillors Mercer and Naden Hawley are seeking, although the report does say that the County Council cannot be subject to any financial liabilities, penalties relating to under-delivery or cost overruns. I'd be interested in knowing, therefore, who is going to be subject to those costs. That would give me extra reassurance it's not us. And also, we're also told that NCC staff costs incurred by this project will be reclaimed from the CITB grant. And looking at the table at the bottom of page 23, the amount that appears to be in there for that is a project manager, £60,000. I understand, I fully get that's not the salary, but is that the only staff costs that the county is going to incur?
Okay. Councillor Morris.
Thank you for your input on that. Actually, if you look at I'll go to Councillor Stanborough first. If you look at 8.3, it does make it quite clear that there's no exposure to NCC budgets from this project. Obviously, we'll firm that up in a more legalistic way, I'm sure, when we're doing the paperwork for it. But I can assure colleagues that we will do our very best to not expose this authority to any overspends of any description whatsoever. It will come on time and on budget, and if it doesn't, somebody else will have to pay for it. But it won't be NCC. I think that sort of sums up, I think everyone more or less asked the same question, so I'm going to, unless anyone wants to ask anything else, I think we'll leave it at that and just say what great news this is for the county.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cabinet, do we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. That's the last item. So the next Cabinet meeting is on the February the 12th, and that will be the budget meeting. So no doubt there'll be plenty of attention and interest in that meeting. One thing I did want to say at the start again was that we are constantly reviewing the format of Cabinet, and we may look to make a few changes at the next meeting as well to keep improving it. Thank you.